Assalamu alaikum, it's your brother Ibrahim here from Idlib, Syria. Being that the Syrian Salvation Government appointed its ministers a number of days ago, I thought I'd do a quick analysis of what the Syrian Salvation Government is like at the moment, what ministries they have, and also a little bit, I've got a little bit about the obstacles they're facing and maybe where they should be going in the future. I thought I'd draw it up. The Representative Council, they're the highest authority in the liberated areas with regards to the civil affairs, with regards to the security affairs here in the liberated areas. They're the ones that approve the Syrian Salvation Government. They're the ones that approve even the appointment of the Prime Minister, and they're the ones that approve the appointment of the ministers in the government. You have the Justice Ministry, Religious Affairs Ministry, the Interior Ministry. You have the Economic Ministry. You have the Agricultural Ministry. You have the Public Services. You have Humanitarian Aid and Development. You have the Education Ministry. You have the Higher Education Ministry, which is the universities and the colleges. You have the Health Ministry, and you'll notice I've left an empty box at the end, and that's where hopefully in the future I can establish a Ministry of Defence. Also, I've drawn up a little sketch, you could say, of the freed areas and its situation in the region. You have the regime borders with the freed areas. You have Turkey on the northern part of the liberated areas, and you have on the northeastern side, you have the Syrian interim government, which also has a national army. Inside of the liberated areas, you have little governorates. You have Jisr al-Shuhur, which is the western side of the liberated areas. You have Jabal al-Zawiya or Zawiya Mountain, which is the southern side of the liberated areas, south of the M4 highway. You have Idlib city in the middle. That's a little governorate that manages and monitors the city of Idlib. You have Idlib countryside. You have Saramada, which is classed as a little economic hub for the liberated areas. You have Harim. It's a very ancient city, has many cities, Salqin and other cities around it, which is the northern western side of the liberated areas. You have Atma, which is, you could say, the hub for the refugee camps and the refugees. Hundreds of thousands of refugees reside in Atma. And you have western Aleppo, which is what remains of the Aleppo province, which is part of the liberated areas. That's just a quick rundown on the government and you could say the way that it's distributed here in the freed areas and the little governorates that are in charge of managing the liberated areas in Idlib. Also, I thought I'd mention some important obstacles which maybe over the 3 years the Syrian Salvation Government has operated, going into its 4th term now. It's faced some important and very strategic obstacles, being that it's only, like I said, 3 years old. So the government is not very old. It's really struggled with the first obstacle. It's really struggled with building international recognition, being that the government was established here on the ground, inside of the freed areas, on the ground by the revolution sons, you could say, inside on the ground. It's really worked on trying to build recognition with the public and with the society. You can imagine over the 3 years, it's struggled a lot with the battles and other issues. So building recognition with the society has been a very important thing it's tried to work on. This has been a big obstacle for the government. Also, the obstacle, which is, like I mentioned, the battles. You've had serious battles where the Assad regime and his allies, Russia, the occupation, and Iran, have pounded and attacked the liberated areas on numerous occasions throughout the life of the Syrian Salvation Government. Many of these battles have caused hundreds of thousands of Syrian citizens to be displaced and exiled from their homes, causing big pressure on the government to try to organise for them refugee camps, organise for them housing and homes, as well as organise for them assistance, being that these people have been displaced, left all their wealth and all their properties behind them. Obstacle number 3 is the regional powers. You could say the internal struggle, the Syrian struggle to try to win over the hearts and minds of the people You have, like I said, the Syrian Salvation Government's one of the governments operating in Syria, as well as the interim government, the Assad regime itself, and the government or the body that's in charge of managing the Syrian Democratic Forces areas in eastern Syria. That regional struggle and competitiveness has also been a big obstacle for the government, and they've faced it in its history. Now, let's come and talk a little bit about the future of where should things go, where could things go in 2021. Recognition, as I mentioned, being an obstacle, definitely needs to be worked on. The government has to work on trying to establish international recognition, and in addition to that, working harder on trying to establish, you could say, recognition from the public and from the citizens of the liberated areas. The international recognition and internal recognition will definitely assist it in developing and you could say solving a lot of the problems and bring much more solutions to the hardship and harm the Syrian people and the free Syrian people living in the liberated areas are facing on a daily basis. Number two, I mentioned this, the ministry which is currently not established and needs to be established is the Ministry of Defense. Now, the Ministry of Defense, if it gets established, this will unify the military bodies and the factions that are operating here and defending the liberated areas. Now, this ministry will definitely be a big step, you could say, in developing the liberated areas and bringing a lot of, you could say, abilities, unifying a lot of the abilities of the revolutionaries to try to defend the liberated areas. This will be a big task on the Syrian Salvation Government. If they're able to establish that, that'll be a huge achievement. Number three, our children in education, our children's future are on the line. Over the years of the war, and particularly in the last number of years, our children have lacked in their education, learning how to read, write, and arithmetic, and other sciences. This really will affect the future of the revolution, will affect the future of our children and establishing the future of the freed areas. So strengthening the education department and bringing forth solutions for our children and making up the ground and whatever our children lost over the years will be a very important, very strategic solution, a very strategic addition to the strategy of the government that they really need to work on. Number four, we have youth in the streets, youth in the refugee camps that are unemployed. Now, with unemployment comes many problems in society. Bringing forth solutions for the youth in employing them, the youth being able to support themselves and bring food on the table of the families, being able to establish a future for themselves will be a big task for the government, the Syrian Salvation Government, to work on in 2021. Last but not least, we have 1.2 plus million refugees living in refugee camps, the majority of them living in tents made out of cloth or material. Now, these are our people. These are the people that have supported the revolution, decided to leave their homes and their wealth to get away from the oppression and destruction and death by the Assad regime and his allies. These people are trusts in the neck of the government. They're waiting to see what the government can bring forth for them, solutions with regards to aid, solutions with regards to housing. You can see in the cold and the rain, it brings mud and very hard conditions for these over 1 million people living in these refugee camps, bringing solutions for housing, trying to transform them from tents and refugee camps to housing and something that can protect them from the cold and from the rain in winter and from the heat and the sun in summer. Look, 2021 will be a huge, it's going to be a big test for the Syrian Salvation Government, what it's capable of providing to its citizens, what solutions it can really bring forth to the people here in the liberated areas. I do hope that whatever they do, it can bring some sort of solutions and minimize the harm and the hardship of the already hurt Syrian people living here in the liberated areas. Jazakallah khair. I hope I've been able to explain this in a way that you've been able to understand it. If you have any questions or comments, flick them over to me. I'll do my best to try to interact with you and answer them. Jazakallah khair. It's your brother Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.